Hi everyone. I didn't see you there. I was just watching my favorite TV program. Very informative. Uh, I hope that you're all doing well. I am also doing well. Just my little Blues Clues friends here. And today, I want to finish talking about Hamilton's fiscal policies. Now, as usual, well, I should say, normally, I would start the class, of course, with a little view of nature. And I thought I had a great clip for you. This morning, as I got up and I was working on some stuff, I looked out my window and I saw our neighborhood fox in our backyard, which is pretty recent, pretty regular occurrence. But this morning, I had a special treat. The fox caught and killed a squirrel and started eating it. And I thought I had captured it all on my trusty little telephone here. I was filming for a couple of minutes and it was spectacular. The fox was looking very playful as he ripped this helpless little creature apart and devoured him. And then when I thought that the scene was finished, I looked and guess what I had done? I had taken not a very good still photograph of the fox before he even got to the squirrel. My phone was on the wrong setting and, well, you know the story. So, lesson, we can always improve. And I hope to someday be able to use a cell phone correctly. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the remainder of Hamilton's fiscal policies. I love this. You can tell. I really enjoy this topic. Who's that? Don't worry, I'll tell her all the wrong answers to make her look bad in class. Okay, anyway, so yesterday we talked about funding at par, that was review. We talked about assumption of state debts, review. If you don't get it by now, well, go back and watch the video again. We talked about the low protective tariff. That was new for most of you. And I left you on the questions. For the questions, I left you with a bonus question. The bonus question had to do with another way that Southern planters were hurt by a tariff. Did anyone get that? Or I should say, you got that? Good. What did you say? Oh, really? That's right. The tariff hurts planters in two ways. The way that I explained is this. The price of imported goods goes up, and planters are constantly importing fine luxury goods. Why? Why? Can you tell me? Is it because they want to help struggling businesses in Great Britain? That's right. That's not right. It's because they want to impress people by wearing nice clothes, having nice carriages, drinking fine bottles of wine, reading important and expensive books. Okay, so that's the thing we talked about yesterday. Today, I'm going to give you the bonus answer. And the bonus answer is this. The other way that a tariff hurts Southern planters is this. When a country puts a tariff on another country, that other country usually retaliates by putting a tariff on the original country. So the US puts a tariff on Great Britain. Great Britain doesn't like that because it hurts its manufacturers. So it puts a tariff on the US. Now, the tariff on US goods, who is that going to affect? Are people in Great Britain buying American manufactured goods? No. Why would they? Great Britain already makes the best and the most manufactured goods. They put a tariff on American natural resources, right? Raw materials. And who sells the most raw materials to Great Britain? That would be
America.
What part of America?
What was the question?
Who sells the most natural resources to Great Britain?
The South.
The South does, that's right, because the South grows, with plantation agriculture. Remember, they're not yeoman farmers. They grow tons of tobacco and they sell to Great Britain. Now, is a tariff going to get people to not want to smoke tobacco? I wish it were so, but it's not. However, when you raise the price of something, people tend to buy less, right? It's just the fact. Think about it. When the price of gasoline has gone up, if you pay for your own gasoline, do you tend to drive less? I bet you do, right? When I was a kid, I've told you this before. The first day I got to high school, I was shocked that like everybody smoked cigarettes, right? I didn't, picture of health. But, almost all my friends did. It was actually, the school allowed it. There was a smoking room. But over time, as the price of tobacco went up because governments put taxes on it, smoking went down, right? Now, you could also argue that there's all sorts of public health messages out there saying that smoking is really, really bad for you. They'd been out there for a long time, though. I think what really got people to stop smoking quite so much, or even start smoking in the first place, was the fact that a pack of cigarettes was super expensive. Anyway, so back to our tariff here, Hamilton's tariff. If the U.S. puts a tariff on Great Britain, which it does, 8%, Great Britain puts a tax on America, and Southern planters, therefore, sell less to Great Britain. And that's bad for Southern planters. They're making less money. At the same time, what are they having to do? They're having to spend more money to buy their fancy luxury goods. It's harder for them to flex, as Stephen is probably saying right now. Okay, so that's another way that tariff hurts. Okay, and that's an important thing to remember. We're gonna run into this concept a lot this year. I often think that if former President Donald Trump had taken this class or maybe watched this video, he would have understood the way tariffs work a little bit better. Because you might recall that he put tariffs on all sorts of countries when he was president. And his arguments seemed kind of lame to me because he was overlooking the fact that A, the people who pay tariffs are the domestic consumers, right? He seemed to think that China would end up paying the tariff. That's a ridiculous notion. And he also seemed to forget about the fact that China would just put tariffs on our manufacturers, in this case, farmers. American farmers sell a lot of commodities to China, but they'll sell less if there are tariffs. So he was actually hurting his own constituents. Take my class, Donald. Come on, I'll give you a front row seat. You can take Dylan's seat, That'd be perfect. You could sit right there next to Dylan. You could sit on top of him if you wanted to. I don't care. Okay. So next, fiscal policy. Don't worry, Dylan. It was a joke. Just a joke. Okay. Not funny. Next fiscal policy is called the excise tax. Write this down. Excise. EXCISE. Excise tax on whiskey. Now, an excise tax is, just think of it as a sales tax, okay? But instead of a tax on imports, it's just a tax on things made in the country, and this one's going to be on whiskey, okay? Now, remember, we talked about this before. People drink a lot of alcohol in this time period, right? When we started the course, the favored drink was rum, right? And that's because we were getting a lot of molasses from the British West Indies and sometimes the French West Indies. You remember the Molasses Act. And rum was a hot commodity, okay? But whiskey has surpassed rum for American consumers. Why? Well, what do you think whiskey is made of? Anyone got an answer out there? Any of you yeoman farmers? Ian, I bet you know. How do you know this, Ian? Ian, I'm shocked. Yes, Ian, though, that's right. Whiskey is made from grain. There's different kinds of whiskeys made from different kinds of grains. Bourbon tends to be made from corn. There's rye whiskey, which actually was a kind of a staple here in Maryland back in the day before Prohibition. Maryland produced a lot of rye, I guess because on the Eastern Shore they grew a lot of rye. Okay. Or just a regular, whiskey is made of wheat. Okay. And, the yeoman farmers of America are growing a lot of wheat. So we are producing a lot of whiskey. Okay. Now, this tax, again, I don't have my notes. I think it's something like 7 cents per gallon of whiskey. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but remember, per capita consumption of whiskey is huge at this point. I read a book a couple of years ago. I think it's something like 38 gallons of whiskey per person per year. That's pretty astounding. That's a lot of whiskey, given the fact that that's per capita, and not everybody is drinking whiskey. I mean, some people are drinking a lot more than 38 gallons per year. What would Ben Franklin say? Anyway, now, so there's a tax on whiskey. Okay, now we're going to see that there's going to be a problem with this. Okay, and I'm going to explain the problem right now. Of course, what did I say yesterday? Whenever there's a policy, some people like it and some people dislike it. If you're a bondholder, do you like these taxes? Well, yeah, because those taxes are going to go pay your bonds off, right? And that's what you want. And who are the bondholders? They tend to be wealthy people. Where do the wealthy people tend to live? They tend to live on the East Coast, in this case, mainly the Northeast. Okay, now let's talk about who will be negatively affected by the whiskey tax. Well, whiskey producers will be affected for the same reason I just talked about with tobacco. If the price of whiskey goes up, people sell less whiskey. So there's one reason, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Of course, I love to get complicated. It's what I do. Here's the complication. So farmers all over America can grow whiskey. However, there are a lot of farmers who are living west of the Appalachian Mountains, right? This is a long-term trend, right? We've been talking about people wanting to move west of the Appalachians for a long time now. Think origins of the 7 Years' War, right? And the Ohio River Valley. Well, so there are people in not only west of the Appalachians, but even just western Pennsylvania, for instance, who are growing a lot of wheat. Think of some of the new states that are about to come into the Union, right? We're talking about Kentucky, Tennessee. Those are two, to this day, those are two big whiskey producing states. Okay, and the reason for that is the following. If you're a Western farmer living very, very far from the coast, if you grow 160 acres worth of wheat, it's a lot of wheat, what are you going to do with it all? You can't sell it to your neighbor. Why not? What does your neighbor do? That's right. He grows 160 acres of wheat as well. Probably not that much, but you get the idea, right? Also, wheat is really bulky and heavy. How many wagons would it take to transport all that wheat from your farm in western Tennessee all the way to the East Coast? That is not an efficient way to do business, right? It's too much bulk. There are no railroads. The railroad has not been invented yet. So here's what happens. If you're a Western farmer, you don't bother trying to ship your grain. You try to condense it into a smaller package. How could you condense, like imagine room 225, if you're not in it right now. Imagine that room being filled to the ceiling with grain. Okay, that's a bulky thing that would be expensive to transport. Plus, what would happen if you tried to transport by wagon? What would probably happen to it? It'd get rained on and it would spoil, right? So it's just too risky. So you take all that grain and what's the verb? Anyone got the verb, Ian? Ian, what are you grinning about? Ian, something's up with Ian. Yeah, you distill it. That's right, Ian. You distill that grain into whiskey. And what do you think would be more bulky? All that grain or all that grain distilled into whiskey? Well, the volume would go down when you distilled it into whiskey. You'd have a smaller volume, okay? That whiskey would be put into barrels. Would those barrels be a safer way to transport? Yes, right? They're not going to spoil. In fact, the whiskey will get better over time. So here's the point. If you're a Western farmer, you grow grain. In order to get your grain to market, you turn it into whiskey. If you're an Eastern farmer, you grow grain. to get your grain to market, do you have to turn it into whiskey? You don't. You can just sell it as grain. Okay? So guess who's getting taxed? That's right. The Western farmers are getting taxed and the Eastern farmers are not. If you're a Western farmer, does that make you angry? Does that make you want to go take a couple shots of whiskey and then maybe tar and feather a federal revenue agent? Because that's what they're going to do. There's another problem. Out west, there's very little currency, right? Coins, gold and silver coins, do not make it out west, or if they do, they quickly get funneled back to the east. I don't really want to explain why. Sorry, but I just don't want to. So they don't have money, and if you don't have money, what do? How do you get things that you want? Well, you got to barter, but bartering's tough. Imagine, you're a shoemaker and you want a house. I might be plagiarizing from Adam Smith right now. I don't remember, but that's a lot of shoes that you'd have to sell to that housemaker, right? That housemaker better have a lot of feet because I don't know. Maybe Zach's a housemaker. Anyway, so they need a medium of exchange. Now I'm going to give you the word of the day. This word is brought to you by Cameron Shojai, class of 2004, I believe. Cameron Shojai, he taught me this word a long time ago. He's actually the bloke. I don't know if you remember back in 9th grade, my classroom, it had a really cool pastel drawing of Plato's allegory of the cave. That was made by Cameron Shojai. This boy gave me many things, but the word he gave me is this. Write it down. It's called fungible. 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 Anyone know what that means? Fungible. Here's what it means. Fungible means something that's fungible is something that can be used as a medium of exchange. That is, it holds value so that you can use it as a currency, essentially. Right? So those of you who are lifers here at GCS, do you remember back in I guess it was your lower school days, they had those weird, I think they're called cocoa pods that fell from the trees back behind the manor house? I bet you some of you used to collect those pods and use them as a kind of currency. Cavity, were you buying Mrs. Kaufhold's test answers with a couple of pods from the tree? Is that what was going on, Cavity? Huh? Claudia, you too? For shame. Anyway, those would be fungible. Maybe some of you, Trey, still play with Pokemon cards. Yeah, those are kind of fungible. You can trade those for things, can't you? Pokemon, yeah. So whiskey was fungible. So if you're a farmer, you don't have any currency, but you have whiskey. So when you go to the mercantile or the general store, you basically trade your whiskey for all the things that you want to buy. You're going to buy some calico cloth for the missus. You're going to buy some coffee. You're going to buy some licorice for the children. It's Christmas time after all. And you do it all on whiskey. Now, let's get this straight. It's not as if you walk in with a bottle of whiskey and, like the guys at the cash register, and you're like, let me I'll take a pack of gum. And the guy's like, that'll be one shot. So you pour it, and he's like, by the end of the day, the guy's like, That's not the way it works. It's just like you give the whiskey to the mercantile, and then the mercantile gives you credit for the things that you're going to buy. You with me? Anyway, so the farmers are really angry. The Western farmers are really angry because this tax on whiskey is hurting them in multiple ways, right? They're going to sell less whiskey. Their medium of exchange or their currency is being taxed. Is the currency on the East Coast, which is just regular coins, is that being taxed? No, it isn't. Imagine you go to an ATM. You and your friend go to an ATM. You put your card in. You're from Western Hoco, and because you're from the West, the government taxes the money you take out of the bank. Whereas your slightly more dapper and elegant friend from Annapolis puts his ATM card in and doesn't get taxed. would you feel resentful? I mean, not only because, I happen to be more dapper, but also because the government's treating me better than he's treating you. I think you'd be annoyed by that. Okay? All right, so these farmers are upset. Okay, and we'll see what that's going to lead to a little bit later on. That's number 4 of Hamilton's fiscal policies. Or this quarantine's going on to a little bit too long. All right, now let's get to number 5. I'm going to start number 5. I'm not going to finish it. Number 5 is called the National Bank. Hamilton would like there to be a national bank. Okay, now why does he want a national bank? Well, remember I said yesterday that he looked around the world to see which country was, the most powerful, the most successful. What country was that? No, it was not France, Drew. It was Great Britain, right? And as I said yesterday, Great Britain is doing so well because it has already started to industrialize. Now, guess what one of the key ingredients to that industrialization was? Sure, Great Britain has a lot of coal. That helps, right? Great Britain has a lot of things going for it. It's a pretty open society, but I'm not going to get into all that. But Great Britain also has a national bank. Okay, now here is our first chance to talk about banks. One of my favorite topics. I mean, I can't tell you how sad I am not to be in 225 with you to talk about banks. I love talking about banks. Why? Well, let's think about it. Why are banks important? What do banks enable people to do? Katie, what do banks allow people to do? Very good, Katie. If I have a good idea, you know me, I got a million of them. But I also have no money. If I have a good idea, I can go to the bank and say, hey, I got a great idea. Listen to this. The toast truck, the WAG. Did I tell you about the aspirin necklace? I'm an older guy. I go out there, I go out there mountain biking. I go pretty hard. And one of these days I'm going to have a heart attack, those candy bracelets where you just take it, you kind of chew off a piece and you eat it. So I've invented a bracelet that's filled with aspirin, so that when I get to the top of a big hill, I start, having a heart attack and I chew that aspirin, and it's supposed to keep you alive for a couple minutes anyway. So, I figure the over 50 crowd is going to really go for that. So I go to the bank, I tell them that story, and, the banker's like, Macaluso, you're an idiot. Get out of here. No, really. He's like, Macaluso, that's a great idea. And he loans me the money to start making aspirin necklaces. And then I become like, I make like hundreds of dollars off that invention, I'm set for like days. And until I get sued because like I couldn't afford aspirin, so I just put candy on it. Anyway, so banks are good because when people have good ideas, they can borrow money and they can start new businesses, right? And when you start a new business, you give people goods and services that they want. You also create more jobs, so the economy grows, okay? So you need a healthy banking system in order to have a strong economy. What kind of economy does Hamilton want to have? He wants to have an industrial economy, right? Will banks loan money to would-be factory owners? They will, and then America will become more industrial, and Hamilton thinks that an industrial economy will be strong, just like Great Britain's economy is strong. If your economy is strong, what happens to your military? Why, of course, your military also becomes stronger, right? And you have the industrial base to support it. Okay, does that make sense? So Hamilton thinks a national bank will be a really good idea. Now, there are banks already. The problem is they're small, right? Hamilton's idea is to have a big bank. A big bank will be able to give out bigger and more loans, okay? There's another advantage. If you had a national bank, it would create a national currency, okay? You see, there isn't a national currency at this point. There's dozens of different currencies out there. Every state has different currency. Okay, and that's confusing. That's bad for trade. A national bank would over time produce a national currency, which would facilitate trade. We'll talk more about that at some other point. Okay, so Hamilton wants a national bank. He thinks it'll be really good for the economy. Now we're getting deep into this class. It's 25 minutes so far. I don't want to go too much longer. I'm just going to give you some of the details. This bank will be capitalized at $10 million. That means the bank will start with $10 million in its vaults. That's $10 million that it could loan out potentially. Where is it going to get that $10 million? Well, guess what kind of company it is? What is always the right answer when I ask you this question? No, it's not the Treaty of Paris. Wrong. Yes, it is the joint stock company, right? This bank will be a joint stock company. So it's going to sell $10 million worth of stock. There's a catch. Guess who is going to own 20% of that stock? That's $2 million for those of you who are math challenged, which I realize is just about all of you. $2 million of that stock will be bought by the national government. Yes, that's right. Alexander Hamilton, the father of American capitalism, was in favor of at least partial government ownership of a private entity. Am I saying that Alexander Hamilton is a socialist? Well, I don't know. It sounds kind of like I am. Okay, but Hamilton said, no, this is a great idea because A, the national government will have kind of a controlling interest in the bank because it'll be the largest stockholder, right? And it's also trying to do something that's going to be good for American society. Isn't that what governments are for? They're to provide for the general welfare. That's what the preamble says. And in his mind, a large and robust banking system would promote the general welfare. So the government absolutely has good reason to make a big bank. Okay, now it's only going to be 20%. Okay, the government will have the biggest say in the policies of this bank, but it won't, it won't hold a majority. Okay, here are some other advantages. So we'll have a national currency, we'll have a big bank, and the third thing is this. When the government collects taxes, right? Remember those excise taxes, those tariffs. Where does it put that money? Does George Washington just go and put it under his pillow at night, roll around in it, and no, that's disgusting. That's gross. The government's going to take that revenue. Eventually, it's going to spend it, of course, but before it spends it, it's got to store it someplace. And where will it store it? In the national bank. This does two things. One, the government earns what on that deposit? That's right. It earns interest. That's good. How can the taxpayers be upset about that? Two, that money is not just sitting under George Washington's pillow or in some vault. It's going to be loaned back out to people. So it's going to be in circulation, which is going to cause the economy to get even bigger. Genius, Alexander Hamilton. He's a very bright guy. Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton. He's not going to lose his shot, right? He's going to do it. Of course, you can guess, like clockwork, is there going to be a problem? Are some people going to be upset? Of course, they're going to be upset. And I want you to think about that. That's going to be on, I'm going to give you a couple of questions to answer for homework. And the bonus question is going to be like, who's going to dislike a bank and why? All right, that's all I got today. So I hope you enjoyed. Hey, by the way, thanks so much for all the likes and comments on the YouTube channel. I really appreciate that. My rating is soaring. Thank you so much. You guys, you're peaches, all of you. But I got to go. Have a good day.